I apologize. We're getting a 5-minute late start. We are coming out of closed session. We have nothing to report. Amy, if you would please call roll.
Councilmember Kirby.
Here.
Berlant.
Here.
Mackey.
Here.
Powers.
Here.
Mayor Spokley.
Here. Obviously, this is a important day in the history of our country, 9/11, and what occurred back in 2001, I think, changed things for a lot of us. I had the opportunity to speak at 2 or 3 of the 9/11 events in town over the weekend, and while we don't have a big fanfare presentation here tonight, we do have a little commendation that I'll read after we do the Pledge of Allegiance. But in honor of those who fell and our first responders that are out there protecting us on a day-to-day basis, would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. So this is a proclamation we put together in remembrance of 9/11. I'll read it quickly here for everybody. Whereas on September 11, 2001, nearly 3,000 innocent men and women and children lost their lives to a tragic act of terror. Amid danger and uncertainty, countless civilians and fire responders risked their lives to search through the wreckage of the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Stony Creek Township, Pennsylvania. Whereas the Mr. Ed M. Kennedy Served America Act, approved by Congress and enacted into law on April 21, 2009, designated September 11th to be observed as an annual National Day of Service and Remembrance. We join people from across the country and around the world to remember and honor the victims and heroes in this of this day 16 years ago. Therefore, I, Matthew Spokley, Mayor of the City of Auburn, California, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize September 11, 2017 as 9/11 Remembrance Day in Auburn, and I call this observance to the attention of all of our citizens. Thank you all very much. Next item on our agenda is the approval. This is a time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or change of the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Do we have any changes from the council? Seeing none, any members of the public want to change the sequence of our agenda this evening? All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Next item on the agenda, consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any item removed from the any item removed will be considered after the motion is approved of the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes?
I'd like to remove item number 3.
Anybody else on the council want to remove anything? So removal of item 3. Any member of the public have items on the consent calendar that they'd like to pull off and discuss further? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve the consent calendar with pulling item number 3.
Second.
Motion and a second. Amy?
Councilmember Kirby.
Aye.
Berlant.
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Powers.
Yes, abstaining from item number 1.
And Mayor Spokley.
Yes. All right, item number 3, ordinance creating streamlined procedures for permitting electric vehicle charging stations.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just be quick.
Okay?
Everyone knows the passion that I have for electric vehicles, and I just wanted to thank Public Works Department and Bernie and our planning, community development for bringing this particular issue forth, because I think that we don't have enough electric charging stations in our city, and we need as many as we can possibly get. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Anybody from the public have any questions on this particular item? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to introduce and hold first reading by title only of an ordinance adding Chapter 163 to the Auburn Municipal Code titled Electric Vehicle Charging Stations.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilwoman Mackey. Roll call vote, please, Amy.
Councilmember Kirby.
Aye.
Berlant.
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Powers.
Aye.
Mayor Spokley.
Aye. Moving right along. Next on our agenda is public comment. This is a time provided so that the public may speak to the council on items not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on these items not included on the agenda. However, the items will be automatically referred to staff. Please speak your name, spell your name, and provide your address if you desire. Council members shall have the option to speak for 30 seconds on any item not on the agenda at this time. So I'll start to my right. Councilman Kirby, anything?
Nothing. I'm a little bit distracted, though, because I'm trying to schedule a flight to Dallas because my brother just had a major operation, so excuse me for that.
Thank you. Nothing?
No, I have nothing.
A great weekend, Symphony in the Park. Always a great entertainment. Thank you to the Auburn Symphony and, of course, the fair. So once again, we had a busy weekend.
Yeah, and I was going to kind of mention the same thing, and I'll do that now. Friday night, we had Speedway, we had the fair, we had cruise night. If you're bored in the city of Auburn, you got to, and let's not forget the football game at Placer,
Go
Which we won.
Placer.
which again, the band sounded fantastic.
Yep.
So again, if you're bored in the city of Auburn, check your pulse, because there's a lot going on just about every night of the week. And Symphony in the Park Saturday night was fantastic. We had some friends and a little picnic out there. It was just beautiful. We had to figure out how to use that park for more events like that,
Yep.
because it was really wonderful. Alrighty, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. Sally's front and center, ready to go.
Sally Dolly, the butt lady of Auburn, trying to keep Auburn beautiful. And after I was done at the fair on Saturday, I walked around the big parking lot for a little ways, and then I was out there this morning, and I got 2,100 butts total. Wow. And I did not realize, since I've started doing this, I did not realize how many people out there have the same name as Beavis's friend. And I got 1,960 today, and now I have a total of 871,425. And if anyone wants to see how my daily reports go, then I'll be here afterwards.
So I got a question for you, Sally. I've seen you carrying around the clear jug of butts, but you just pick them up and put them into an appropriate receptacle, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. As always. I was worried that there's.
In our living room.
I was worried that there might be a bunch of these clear jugs all over Sally's house.
Well, I do have a container that licorice comes in, and I have 2,540 butts in there, and it weighs 1 pound.
Gotcha.
Because I don't know if I've gone over the Auburn Journal having a insert for kids that talked about tobacco on 2 pages, and they had a dot to dot that was an elephant. And below it, it says, in the United States alone, the weight of all the cigarette butts tossed in 1 year is equivalent to the weight of 30,800 large elephants.
Yeah,
And
crazy.
it's a mess.
Sally, thank you again for what you do for Auburn. All right, anybody else want to speak to the council on items not on our agenda? All right, seeing none, I'm closing public comment. Our first item under council business is a request for funding to purchase an automatic license plate reader. I'm excited to hear about this, John.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present this report. Law enforcement agencies throughout the nation, around the world, are increasingly adopting automated license plate recognition, ALPR systems, to enhance their enforcement and investigative capabilities. The purpose of an automated license plate reader system is to allow officers to scan numerous license plates, analyze the data in relation to crime trends, as well as be notified if a license plate is associated with a stolen vehicle, a wanted person, a person on probation, or associated with a particular crime, as well as identify amber alerts and silver alerts. The cameras scan at an extremely high rate, usually about 60 license plates per second, way beyond the capabilities of any officer. The automated license plate recognition system works off a camera system, either stationary or mobile, and it captures license plates that come within its view. Once the license plate is captured by the camera, the picture of the plate is stored in a server, as well as the GPS coordinates associated with that license plate, when the photo was taken off the license plate, as well as the date and time the photo was taken. The police department will be consulting with the district attorney's office as to the appropriate time frame as to how long we're going to store this data. But the data is really a force multiplier. It allows our officers the ability to scan multiple plates as they're driving around, or allow us to put it in a stationary location and transmit the information that the camera captures. So again, it's a force multiplier. It also, if I can get, on-the-spot data. It provides public and officer safety. Instant data that is being captured, again, lets us know if the vehicle is stolen, if the vehicle is wanted. Last week, unfortunately, officers had to use the system because it was associated with a crime down in the Sacramento area of murder. The vehicle license plate crossed over one of these cameras. It notified the local officers, and the ensuing arrest and shooting took place, actually, to contact the gentleman. But again, they would have never known if the system wouldn't have been in place that this car was wanted in the committing of a double murder earlier previous week. It also manages the data for us, organizes a continuous stream of information, again, investigative tool in assisting us with amber and silver alerts, as I previously stated. It not just catches criminals, but it also exonerates the innocent. If somebody says, well, I know this license plate was in the area, well, we can look at the plate and quickly determine that they weren't involved in the crime that we're looking for. These cameras search in 4 different ways and can develop leads in 4 different ways. They search by location, of course, by the license plate, by a hot list that's entered into this, along with the other agencies that I included in the back of your packet there. And then refine the searches that we can break it down into types of cars. If we know a license plate is associated with a red Ford truck and we run a license plate and it comes back to a blue Ford truck, obviously we can refine those searches even farther. Again, this is going to be an extremely valuable tool. We plan on purchasing this with asset forfeiture funds. It's not in our general fund. We didn't request it when we presented our annual budget, again, but we've had some asset forfeiture funds come in this year, and this is what we'll be purchasing the tool with. Again, it's just going to create a better effectiveness and efficiencies within the police department, and Lieutenant Garlock put this proposal together, and he's here, as well as Steve Adair from Lear, if you have any further questions, or if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, and they can answer from a technical level.
Thank you very much, John. We will start to my left. Councilwoman Mackey?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so the first I ever heard of this was from Officer Morrison.
Yes.
He came to DBA and we were talking about parking problems in downtown. So would this help with parking problems?
It could help with it. Again, we're not going to go out and look for parking violators. I'm not going to get a citation based on the automated license plate reader.
good.
But if we were to go through and let's just say one of our business associations was complaining about parking, we could gather the data and say, okay, well, these vehicles are associated with your businesses and not customers of your business. But again, we are not wouldn't do any enforcement action based on that camera. But
Yeah,
could we
and I
gather
would-
the data? Absolutely. It would work. Because again, you're driving down the roads, in that particular area, 25 miles an hour. For us to run every plate there, it would take hours. This is going to run them very, very quickly, just as we drive down the street.
And the data, I understand, goes into a program somewhere else.
A system, yes, outside of the department. But again, we control our data, and we will give access to other people, just like they'll give access to us, and we can control how long that data is stored. So again, we'll be working with our district attorney to find out exactly how long they would like us to store that information, and then they'll kind of give us the parameters for it. Some people save it 10 days, some people save it 2 years. So again, we want to work with our district attorney, as we did with our personal body cameras, and get their opinion on it, and have them give us direction on how long we should be storing that data.
As long as we're talking about technology, the two cameras that we talked about downtown that were inoperable because our server was needing upgrade to be
Yes.
upgraded, has that happened?
Yes, the server has, I believe, been purchased. I don't know if all of it's been implemented, but I know they were working on the server to purchase it and upgrade that so it would be up farther. We're also looking, from what I understand, that the server was just a portion of it. Now that we're getting into it, they're looking like that we'll also need the data transmission modems. We might also need to upgrade so we can keep constant streaming of the information.
The constant streaming of the cameras, you
From the
mean?
cameras to the police department, yes.
Right.
When we put those in, modems have come a long way. The pipes remain the same, and there's more people using the pipes, sending data down. So we have to, again, as we all know, whether you're in your business or our personal home, the technology is generally on a 3 to 5 year cycle, and then we have to replace it.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Land?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John, the data that's collected, will it sit on a city server, or does it sit on the Vigilant services? Do they
No.
maintain that data?
Yeah, they're going to maintain that. We won't have the capabilities. It'll run through one of our systems, and it'll go through a secure line in and out, but unless I'm wrong, it's going to be stored on their system. Yes, that's what I...
Okay. And then I noticed on the list of agencies that said the Placer County Auto Theft Task Force uses the system. Is that for vehicles that are part of the task force, or do the member agencies? I guess I'm trying to find the connection, because there's the Placer County Sheriff's Department, Roseville, Rockland, Lincoln. I don't see listed here as using it, but what does the task force use it for?
The task force uses it, their specific assignment is auto theft. And so again, as they have it attached to one of their vehicles that's assigned to the task force, we do not have a person associated with the task force. Roseville, Rockland, and the county do. So on one of their vehicles, and CHP, and on one of their vehicles, they have the same type of system that we're looking at purchasing. As they drive around, that system's picking up information.
Okay.
And so again, that's why they have, but we will be the first agency to specifically have this type of technology in the county.
Yeah.
The only other question that I had, and I appreciate you bringing up using the forfeiture fund for the initial purchase, and the ongoing cost, it looks like in the staff report, is $1,800 or so a month. Do we have an average cost of what?
A year.
Well, I'm sorry,
Oh.
I meant a year.
Okay.
If I said a
I was
month.
going to say, wait a second, I might
$1,800
put the brakes
a
on
year.
this one.
But in that fund, do we normally, what's the fund balance typically? And I guess what I'm going with is there enough money to sustain this annual cost out of it, or will we need to look, I mean, it's a small amount, but would it need to be budgeted into general fund or
No, that's a
somewhere
great
else?
question, and obviously, we can look at the trends. We've had somebody assigned to the Tri-County Drug Enforcement Narcotics team. Since we've had somebody assigned to that team, they've brought in a significant portion of money. And so again, I think as long as we have somebody associated with that team, that $1,800 will be covered.
Okay, thank you. That's the only questions I have.
Thank you very much. So John, the idea is great staff report. I appreciate the fact that we're putting the forfeiture money to such a great use like this. I want to talk a little more about the data and the duration which it's required by law to be stored. You mentioned that you're going to work with the DA to come up with a program. There are some local agencies in and around our area. Do we have a sense from them how long we're going to have to hang on to?
Well, we're not going to be hanging on to it. It's going to be actually through our vendor, and they'll be hanging on to it. We're going to kind of give them parameters associated with it. And again, there's this is rather new technology, even though a lot of agencies have it. And so there's been, just within the last couple weeks, there's been a case law that came down associated with that data and the information that we have to provide out of the data that we collect. And so again, I would imagine that the DA's office are pretty conservative in the time limits that they want us to save that data. And they're also looking at, from a prosecutorial standpoint, is they want it to store it as long as possible. But again, we realize that we need to be prudent with that, and we don't want people to think we're abusing that data. And so again, we will go the minimum standards that they set forth, not the maximum, that's for sure.
And again, in the staff report, you touched on the annual cost for the equipment. That includes the storage of the data?
Yes.
So we're all in on an annual basis for the 1,800 for the 3 cameras that we're looking to purchase?
Yes, that, like I said, that's the day, and I would imagine, just like any other business, that cost could go up a little here and there to cover their end, but generally, that's what we're talking
There's
about.
no iCloud subscription to get your device to work again thing like
No.
I've got going on this right now?
We hope this is so successful that we can roll out a second edition of it.
Okay.
And again, I think getting our foot in the door, and again, the ongoing costs, it's just that initial purchase that's expensive. The ongoing costs are very, very reasonable, in my opinion.
And the 3 cameras, are they going to be vehicle mounted? Or are they going to be stationary? Have you thought that far?
Yes, we are. They are going to be vehicle mounted, and they're going to be stationary.
Both.
Yes.
Excellent.
Somewhere.
I'm going to keep that. That's
Somewhere secret.
Well, again, I don't want it, they will be both.
And last thing, in your staff report, you included a list of the California law enforcement agencies using the Vigilant Solution cameras. Any idea why the California State Tax Board is on this list?
I don't, I have enough responsibility running our department. I don't really
All right.
look into there, so I
Fair
can't
enough.
even speculate on that.
That's just scary. Okay. All righty. Any other questions, Daniel?
I'm sorry, Chief, I have one more question for you. It talks about the mobile app that comes along with it, but in the vehicles, should, and apparently if they're put on mobilely, how do the officers see it? Is it only a phone app, or is it connected to their MDCs? And then with that as well, for the one that may or may not be stationary, does the dispatcher access that, or is it all phone app controlled?
I'll let the technical person, I believe this is going to, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is going to notify all our MDCs as well as our stationary dispatcher. Everybody who's tapped into that, the icon, the box, mobile app is just another tool, once we buy into it, that they'll be able to scan license plates with their phone and send the information in.
Oh.
But the officer, if it pings stolen, isn't going to have to pull out their phone while they're driving?
No, it should come across our MDCs.
Perfect. Okay.
All righty. One more question, Councilwoman Mackey?
I noticed that there isn't, we are the only community or city in Placer County that is doing this, other than the Placer County, what is it, Auto Theft Task Force.
Again, this is relatively, it's been out there for a while, but the actual implementation, I think a lot of agencies are looking at how it's working in other places. They made a very good presentation. We've been working on, actually, Lieutenant Garlock's been working on this for about 5 to 6 months now, trying to get all the information ready to present a wonderful staff report that I can take credit for. But they made a great presentation to our Placer County Chiefs Association, the sheriff, about a month ago, so I would imagine other people will start implementing this also. But it's nice that we can be the first adopter and lead the county instead of them leading us.
Okay, thank you.
Great. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to comment on this item? Sally?
I just have a question. Is this a system that can be used for getting a person who's driving at a high speed in Auburn? Dangerously high speed?
I'm not sure I understand the question. This is going to photograph the license plates and check them against databases to see if they're stolen
If
or involved
somebody
in other
were
crimes.
to call that in, we could pull up the information to find out what cars pass through there, but we won't be able to tell who's speeding. So no, That this is not a camera system that gathers speed data or anything like that. If that car were to be involved in an accident later on, we could pull it up and say, you know, it went through our city at a particular time, but we wouldn't be able to say how fast they were speeding.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sally. Anybody else want to comment on this item? All right. Seeing none, did the manufacturer want to say anything? You don't have to. I'm just making sure. Perfect. Alrighty. With that, I'll bring it back to close public session. Bring it back to council for.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move by resolution to approve the additional funding and purchase of a license plate, says place on here, recognition system to be used by the Auburn Police Department.
Second.
Alrighty. Motion and a second. Amy?
Councilmember Kirby.
Aye.
Berlant.
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Powers.
Aye.
Mayor Spokley.
Aye. And Lieutenant Garlock, thank you very much for your work on this. I'm
Yep.
excited to see you guys implement this thing in the city. Alrighty, John, you're up next.
All right.
Item number 6 on our agenda, homeless and transient update.
Good evening again. This report is about the police department's efforts in regard to our homeless transient population. I hope that I can answer you in your questions and try to provide you information on what your police department can and cannot do in the past and into the future. And I'll take this came right out of the Sacramento Bee this morning. Cynthia Hubert, who wrote the story, she wrote the following words. And the sidewalks outside of Mango's restaurant on K Street is soiled and needs a power wash. A couple of blocks away, a homeless man with wild hair and dirty clothing is lingering at a patio table at a pizzeria where employees are preparing for the lunch rush. Across the street from a construction site on 21st Street where workers are climbing scaffolds, food from discarded foam containers is spilling out onto the walkway. The problems aren't urgent enough to demand police intervention, but they can be annoying and disconcerting to business owners and residents of Midtown Sacramento, which is feeling the impact of the county's growing homeless crisis. I'll give you another scenario, and I brought this up at a meeting I attended, a very productive meeting I attended earlier today. I'm walking through the park and I see a young family with a child wading in the water of a local stream. Or I'm walking through the park and I see a transient man wading in the water, splashing the water off his body. In the law's eyes, this is the same scenario. I would hope I or one of my officers would contact the transient and ask if he needed any help. But if he said no, there's not a lot we can do. But I can't tell you the number of times we get a call of a transient bathing in one of our waterways. I will start this presentation with the same information I give to anybody that asks me this question in regard to this topic. Law enforcement agencies can be a critical partner in local efforts to end homelessness, but they cannot be the sole solution. Enforcement efforts are a tool, but again, they cannot be the sole solution. I start off my presentation with several other local headlines, not local, or recent headlines of other cities and other entities dealing with homelessness. Los Angeles County supervisors endorse a spending plan for Measure 8, $259 million. This is a bad slide. Sacramento sees a surge in homeless people. Who are they? Might surprise you. Sacramento County supervisors, just turn it, Wednesday approve a $5 million plan to beef up patrols along the American River Parkway and clean up its homeless encampments. The article on homelessness might offend you, but this city, they brought up 4 questions. Challenge your beliefs. Is it common argument are homeless people into housing is going to solve the problem? This particular article says no, they just don't need housing. They also need a hand as they go forward. You just can't provide somebody a house. It's a lot of responsibility, as we know. So housing first is not always the solution. Several LA County strikes a deal with cities to streamline homeless services. Transit-related crime is a 5-year high in Victorville. Pacific Beach homeless man, this is the other part of it. In this meeting, I pointed out that law enforcement has a role in this, but again, it's really, I'd say, a limited role on what we can do. Again, we have to balance the needs of the community. We have to balance the rights of our homeless transient population, and again, provide justice in a judicious manner. I can't tell you the number of times I've had people call me and said we should just arrest that person. And again, homelessness isn't a crime. There's not a lot I can do. But again, we can enforce laws that do exist. Again, the last one, in Sarasota, Florida, high-attention news outlets during the height of the city's struggle dealing with homeless. A high-profile lawsuit over the city's Sarasota outdoor sleeping and panhandling prohibitions, paving the way for new leaders. A federal judge on Thursday approved a settlement between the city and the ACLU on the 2-year battle, again, against their enforcement. This map is really poor, and hopefully you saw better in your report. But this is a map where we've taken all the camps, and I have to give Public Works and code enforcement a lot of credit in this. Over the course of the last several months, we did a lot of extra patrols, some of them overtime related, and we went out and we tried to map all of our transient camps. And the map that you have is our latest map, and we're down to 2 transient camps that we know about that have not been abated or are active, and both of those are on Auburn Recreation District land. And so again, we're continue to work with this and update this map. But again, as I stated, and as you know, we deal with Bureau of Reclamation, state parks, Union Pacific Police, Cemetery District, the county, Parks and Rec, or Auburn Recreation District. There's a lot of different entities where the homeless people and transient people have had camps, and again, we work with them to try and solve this issue. I'll go through the crime statistics very quickly and where we stand. And as I stated when I did my 2016 report, the numbers look like they're staggeringly high, and I think they have gone up, but I don't think it's to this magnitude. I do think that the police department, we're doing a much better job of documenting our homeless contacts in regard to the enforcement action as well as our contacts. So again, there's no doubt in my mind that homeless crime has gone up, our contacts with them have gone up, but again, I don't think it's gone up as dramatically as we've as the slides show, because I do believe we're doing a better job of documenting our efforts. Address unknown, again, contacts through the first 6 months of this year. Last year we were at 563, again, we're ahead of the pace at 364. Here are the crime statistics for call type. As you can see, we're drastically down in trespassing, but we're much higher in area checks. Those are those extra patrols that we're trying to accomplish. And the other numbers, like I said, we're much higher through the first 6 months of this year than we were through last year. And again, I think it's a lot to the diligence the officers are out there documenting this, as well as their efforts to, again, we've stepped up our patrols. Again, the last thing we want is any of our citizens not to feel safe. And so again, we're continue to do these extra patrols, and we will continue to do them. Here's the stats by month. As you can see, pretty much every month, with the exception of May, we're well ahead of last year's schedule and last year's times. And again, a lot of that has to do with the increase, but it also has to do with the police department's efforts. Arrests, again, we're at 79 this year as compared to 93 all of last year, and that's through the first 6 months. Again, the officers are being very proactive. We're out there doing our job. But again, even though we've had 79 arrests, we're still getting complaints. So again, we haven't solved the problem here, but we continue to use enforcement as a last resort. But again, sometimes our hands are tied, and we have to take action because they've committed a crime and it's warranted.
And John, just to clarify, these are only the folks who refuse to give you their address.
I can't say they're all homeless transient. Some people, believe it or not, as I've stated before, they just don't like giving the police department their addresses. But I would imagine the majority of these are homeless transient contacts.
Got it. Thank you.
Here again, arrest by crime. As you can see, the warrants are above schedule. Public intoxication, we've made a concentrated effort in that. You can see we all have almost as many in the first 6 months of this year, and we had all of last year. Again, it's the officers being proactive when they're out there. As many drug arrests this year as all of last year. Again, we're looking at the enforcement action, but I'm going to get to in my report, we're also looking at some things to try and solve this and not just have to arrest our way. Address unknowns by month. As you can see, some of the months we are extremely much higher, and June was a warm month, as we all know. So again, I would imagine a lot of those were public intoxication. Citations, we've we did double what we plus what we did for camping violations as we did all of last year. And so again, the officers are being very proactive, and a lot of that has to do with the extra patrol, the work that code enforcement is doing and to get to these numbers.
Hey, Sean,
Yes,
are you all right if we ask questions as you go? through
Absolutely,
your
as you go, please interrupt me.
So, sorry. So the citations, those are somebody's camping, somebody's sleeping.
Yeah. They're
on
not
the
an
road.
arrestable offense. They're a municipal code violation that we're writing a ticket for.
So the first 6 months, we've done 39.
Yes.
So I attended. I joined your officers on one of their patrols a month and a half back. We wrote 5
Yeah.
just in one morning.
And that, I believe that was in the month of August or July, so that's not going to be reflected here. And this is the first 6 months of this year through June 30th.
Wow. Okay.
And so again, in the summer months, as you can see on the previous slide, our numbers go up.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. And we are coming more contacts. So again, when you look at the whole year, there's no doubt these might double or triple.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, now that you mentioned the arrestable offense, what is an arrestable offense? Any of these?
Well, let me see. Petty theft, public intoxication, trespassing, some vehicle code, and vandalism.
And you can arrest them and keep them in jail?
No, it's arrestable. I'm not saying
Right.
they're going to
You
stay in jail.
arrest them,
I never said,
and
I
then
didn't
you
say
let 'em go.
houseable. I said arrestable.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
for my
yeah.
own.
No,
stuff.
no. More than likely,
So you spend all the time and effort and energy arresting them, but you can't keep them.
some of these people they won't even take in jail. It just depends.
Right.
We're having to make some calls on sometimes when the jail gets to a certain level, they're having to kick them out, so they're just not accepting them.
Right. So they're just going to go right back and do what they were doing.
And they're going to be a North Auburn problem when they're released until they squeeze the balloon out there, and then they're going to come back into the city. Address unknown by month, again, citations. You can see May, June, we saw a dramatic drop, but in May, when we started our X patrols, we were out there. That's the end of my slideshow, but as I wrote in my council report, law enforcement encounters with the homeless are a true balancing act of our property owners, of our property users, balancing the civil rights of our homeless transient population, and then balancing the needs of all our citizens to include the homeless. Within this balancing act, people's beliefs sometimes conflict with law enforcement's ability to act. We're working with our city management team and our legal representatives to try and come up with some solutions that could help alleviate the problem. I think if you look at the West America Trail, that's alleviated some problems. And again, that really had nothing to do with law enforcement. That was a really good job by Public Works getting the right people in place to clean the work out there. And again, that's really not a law enforcement issue, but the mayor and I were at a meeting last week where we actually had people complain that we did that because we took somebody's home who had been there for 15 years sleeping on the hill, and they were complaining to us. They didn't think that was right of us. So again, we're balancing act, but it was the right thing to do, and we're continuing to look through that. All the staff in public safety is looking for other areas like that we can possibly utilize, because that's a pretty unique situation there. You're in the city manager and I walked down there several times over the course of the last month, and I would imagine there was probably a 20-degree difference between there and out in the sun when you got down under that shaded canopy. It was very, very cool down there, let alone the water trickling, and we came across a homeless person who had his feet in the water. It was a nice place to sit and much, much cooler. But again, it offers a very unique perspective because, one, you can hide. There were a lot of places to hide. I think we removed that when we removed a lot of the vegetation. But there's also, at the top of the hill, there's a liquor store and a convenience store. There's 2 shopping centers within a couple of blocks of that area. And so, again, a lot of needs. If anybody was going to go camping, that would be a pretty nice place if you could get to a store within a few minutes and have a bubbling brook right there to sleep on. So again, it was a very popular place, and it'll continue. Just like it draws all of us for the right reasons, it draws them for, again, isolated reasons. So again, we are looking at some things that we can do to bring forward to you in the future that will help us deal with this, because the drug issue, we know that's a problem. We have our task force member working on that. Alcohol is obviously a large problem, but public intoxication gets you a 4-hour trip to the jail if you're intoxicated. If you're just drinking, it could be a municipal code citation that doesn't get you anywhere. And again, a citation to a lot of these individuals doesn't mean a lot. If it was any of us, it would mean something, but to some of the individuals that we encounter, it doesn't mean anything. So again, we are looking at some things to bring forward to this body that'll help us do our job better and allow us some tools to work with our businesses so that we don't have these over servings. And one of the things that they did out in Nevada City, and city manager brought this to my attention, I just think it's a great idea, is they had their liquor stores not sell single serve. Little pint size, the single serve alcohol or single serve beers. You had to actually buy a 5th or you had to buy a 6-pack. That's a great idea. I'd never thought about that, and that's worked in other communities. And so again, we're looking at implementing some of those things here and putting a lot of very talented and smart people in the room, including some of our citizens, and have them bring some ideas for us that we can work. And because even if you go to the big city in say San Francisco, on the weekends, they have a large homeless population in the business district, in their financial district. I mean, not business, the financial district, because the stock markets aren't open on Saturday and Sunday, so that's where they go because they're not contacted by a lot of individuals. But those same individuals move to other places Monday through Friday because the stock market's open, the financial businesses are all in place, and they don't go there. And so again, it's a matter of us of balancing everybody's needs as far as balancing our homeless transient population's rights as we move forward with our efforts. So I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions if you have any.
Great. Thank you very much, John, for the presentation. Councilman Kirby.
Well, I heard most of the presentation. I've talked to you before about it. But our residents right now see a very active problem out there.
Yes, they do.
And the unfortunate thing is we can't do much about it. We can't arrest them. We can't arrest them. We can't get them to leave. If we do, they're not going to go to jail. They'll be right back out in the same area. And every city is dealing with this. It's not just us. But this has to be extremely frustrating for all of our residents and the police department and for us. And I don't see any solutions on the horizon to this issue.
Well, again, I think the city manager, when he was here previously, came up with a really good plan that took the current people in place and determined, that panhandling card, that made a difference for a while.
It made a difference.
So again, it's a matter of determining what this group of individuals, what draws them to this area, and again, eliminate some of their, I don't want to step over my bounds here, but again, the panhandling cards work. So again, is it, why are they here? Are liquor selling too much alcohol compared to other places? I don't know. And it's a matter of us as a city working with our community and determining what the draw is.
Well, when we did that, because I was on the council then, it was also on websites. You could make $25,000 to $40,000 in Auburn panhandling. Sure. And the panhandlers are not the same people as
Absolutely
we
not.
determined before of the chronically homeless, who are many of the people that are, mentally ill, on drugs, hassling our residents. And that population has increased dramatically. The true panhandlers are annoying, but I don't think they're as much the criminal element in some ways as, and I'm not that the homeless are the criminal element, but they're the element that's can be very disruptive.
It can be
And
disruptive.
we can't do much about them. We may get rid of the transient panhandlers like we did before, but it's still going to be a real problem with the chronically homeless.
It is, and again, all we can do, and as I've stated and brought to this body, we are in the process of working on, it starts next month, to remodel our investigative bureau, bring in a couple of probation officers who will assist us. There's no doubt in my mind we're coming across homeless people that are on probation. Again, that will assist us. We've reached out to the county, and we'd like to have one of the Health and Human Services provider accompany us on our extra patrols once a month to start off with.
Right.
And again, offer the services. We're going to do everything possible because, and again, I don't know if we can solve the problem, but I want to mitigate it. The last thing I want is any of our citizens to walk through a park and feel unsafe, or walk into our town center and feel unsafe. We want to try and, I don't know if we're going to solve it, but I want to reduce it as much as possible.
And the last thing, isn't it true that the state has dramatically reduced the number of parole officers to almost zero?
At our last chiefs meeting, they said in the 6-county area, and they were due to get more, but in the 6-county area, they had 5 parole officers. Probation has beefed up their staff. Parole, they had 5 parole officers in the 6-county region. That's what I was told.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb?
Are we doing just questions now or comments later?
Questions now.
Okay, I was just asking. Chief, the Prop 47 and 57 money, the cash flow that was going to come in to solve all of the local problems, you don't have to give me your opinion on that. Is that primarily going towards counties with jail facilities, or are we eligible, or do we receive any federal state dollars for the?
It does funnel through the county, but currently one of our task force members on our regional or on our countywide task forces, we receive $100,000 of that money to fund his efforts.
Okay. And I realize that you're giving us an update here on the homeless transient issue from a law enforcement standpoint, but this problem is not, as it's been mentioned, simply an enforcement issue. So I'm going to ask a question, but it may be better answered by our city manager. What are we as a city doing to bring in public works, to bring in any of the other departments or other agencies to really kind of have a more unified or consistent approach to this problem?
We do meet. We've met with our city management, and Public Works has been in there, and we have, again, looked at, because, again, this is, code enforcement falls under Public Works. And so, again, it is a multi-department approach, and Public Works is the one that gathered the resources to clean Auburn or the West America Trail out. So, again, it is all of us looking at it. It's just not law enforcement. Fortunately, we're the only ones here 24 hours a day. So a lot of the calls come in through dispatch 24 hours a day. Public Works staff, thank goodness, they don't have to be here 24 hours a day. And so again, we're right at the front of this, but we are working again with city leadership, city management, as well as our legal team, Public Works. We're all working together to try and solve some of these issues. This isn't just solely a law enforcement issue. There's a lot of cooperation going on behind the scenes amongst departments to try and solve this issue. And again, just a reminder email went out today, and it's been in place, that I was downtown. I noticed a few street lights out, so I asked my staff to, as they're driving around the middle of the night, start sending me and it's something that's been done for umpteen years. But again, it's just a reminder to let them know, and that again, that's where we'll be interacting with Public Works, because obviously I'm not going to go change the bulbs. They're going to do that, and so, but it's gathering the information for them so they can utilize it. And because one of the locations that we had transients complain about, and I went over there after Friday night's event, and sure enough, there was a street light out. So what a better place to be left alone, because there's a street light out, and yet they were gathering in a very safe. They had a bubbling fountain back there. What a night! I wouldn't mind sleeping there myself. So,
okay, the county has really beefed up at least their public view and having their officers, both the problem-oriented policing and their homeless task force out and about. What are we doing along with the sheriff's department? When I had spoke to them probably a good 6 or 7 months ago, we didn't have a lot of involvement. What is your thoughts as far as either are we going to be involved, or what is your thoughts as of a regional approach, since they're clearly visibly doing a lot more, and it sounds like from what you've said, so are we, but I just don't know if it's getting the same visible attention as the county, and what can we do to work together on it?
I don't think we're getting the visibility, again, because we haven't dedicated staff to that. We've created some overtime slots on a regular basis for our officers to go out and do it, and do these extra patrols and do some extra enforcement, as well as educate some of our transient population about the services available, document the camps. So no, we aren't as public as they are. They actually hired probation officers. They hired some deputy sheriffs, and they're working on it. And again, hopefully this is to let you know that we are working on it. We don't have people dedicated to it, but we're dedicated to the problem, and we're trying to solve it with the resources we have now. And there's no doubt if we can't solve it, or it continues to get worse, I might be in front of this body asking for somebody to participate with them on a regular basis and have us go out there and them go here, because we're dealing with a lot of the same population. But right now, like I said, we're handling it internally. We're handling it again, we've made some great strides as far as our enforcement, as far as our documentation. We didn't have that map of where the camps were 5 months ago. Just having that map is a huge benefit for all of us. So we all understand the problem. And so again, we aren't doing it, and we haven't hired anybody to do it, but we are doing some of the same things that they are. And like, again, hopefully when we get probation in the building, they'll be able to assist us. And again, reaching out to Health and Human Services, if we can get them, even once a month to come out with us on our extra patrols and provide some of the same things they're doing out in the county.
And I guess my question wasn't just about, why don't we have an officer as part of their regional task force, but would it be of any use for us to have an officer that's a liaison with that task force to bring back whatever methods or whatever strategy they're using in the county to ensure that, because what I'm seeing, and remember, I live right on the border,
Yes.
Within feet of the county and the city, and what I see is because they're more visible, there's the potential that they're pushing their problem into the city, and if we're not using the same strategy as they are, could we potentially, see that increase? And so I guess I'm asking, I don't want to dictate how to do it because it's your department, but having at least a liaison part of that task force, do you think that would bring any benefit to the city?
We should constantly be in contact, not just about homeless issues, because again, North Auburn really is Auburn. It's all the same kind of criminal behavior they're having up there, we're having in the city. So again, I encourage all of my staff to work with them on a regular basis, and I know my lieutenants have reached out to the people who are running their task force to work with them. So we're in constant contact with them. I don't know if we have an officer who reached out to the homeless task force and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing out here?" But from a management supervisory level, we're in contact with our partners to the north quite often, and because there's no doubt when we squeeze, it pops over there, and when they squeeze it, we get a lot of the results. And so again, we're working with them, and we had to reach out to their staff not too long ago because they were dropping people off over at the Amtrak station thinking it was a bus station. They weren't trying to do anything deviant. They just didn't realize it wasn't a bus station anymore. So we had to let them know this is not a bus station. This is the Amtrak station, so please don't drop them off here thinking they're going to get on a Greyhound bus. That's not here. The only Greyhound bus in the area is in Colfax, so you can take them out to your area. But again, some of their staff didn't know that there wasn't because it used to be. And so again, it's finding out these little nuances and working with them and working with all our citizens as well as the service providers to help alleviate and hopefully help this population.
I've read that a number of communities and cities have either found benefit to it or have enacted, for lack of a better word, harsher loitering codes. What here in Auburn do we have, and is that an avenue that would attempt, again, I know we're talking a lot about panhandlers and transients and homeless kind of intermixed, but I think one of the bigger problems is just the visibility of a group of people not moving. That is probably a very big problem out at the Elm Shopping Center, where individuals will sit outside the store for significant periods of time. Again, I know you're not going to arrest them, and that's not what I'm asking, but is loitering something that at least kind of keeps people moving so that they're not staying in one spot?
Loitering is it's that slippery slope and against that balancing act, because I know somebody who sits in Starbucks for about 7 hours every day. I say hello to him every time I see him. And so again,
And I enjoy seeing you.
that loitering, like I said, because we want to encourage people to use these benches outside of our restaurants, and we want to encourage them to go into, but that loitering, like I said, it's a slippery slope, and again, if they're not going to, if it's just going to be another citation, I don't know if that's going to be effective. There's got to be some type of ramifications behind our enforcement action to make it work.
Okay. You mentioned very briefly about parole and their reductions here over the past, with realignment as well. What's our relationship with state parole? Is there any?
We constantly we're in the parole officers that we are left. We're again, it's a phone call away. We utilize their services when we do come across from parole. We don't have the ability to create a parole hold, so we have their numbers 24 hours a day. So we can, if we come across a parolee who needs to a hold put on them, and so we do have a good relationship with what's left, but they're stretched very, very thin, and we realize that. And in a lot of aspects, their hands are tied more than mine. and they have large caseloads that they're dealing with in a large region. And so again, we do have a really good relationship with them, as well as we do probation, and we want to utilize all the services. But again, this is a problem. I don't know if law enforcement, like I said, I think we should be at the front of it, but we're not going to be. We're not going to solve this problem.
Do you think, though, with the parole office, regional office being in North Auburn, is there any increase in I'll use the word transients or obviously parolees coming in for face-to-face check-in? Does that increase their traffic? And again, I realize you're not a parole agent or work for them, but is that something that you guys have discussed or heard any feedback of how to fix that problem?
You talk to parole, and I've talked to their executives, and they say, no, absolutely not. It doesn't increase. But there's no doubt in my mind it does. That parole office is right outside our city limits. And there's no doubt I've seen people personally walking up Highway 49 on their way to that office that don't belong in our city. So does it create it? Absolutely. But if you talk to their numbers, they say absolutely not. So
is there anything that we can do about that, or even regionally or at a statewide level or is it as simple as parole having more offices so that you're not bringing people from other communities into a different community just for a check-in?
Well, they say the ones that come to our office are from our area, but again, I have no way to confirm that. Their officers are supposed to be going out to the other counties and doing their compliance checks out there. But again, I don't want to. There's no doubt in my mind we're getting people coming to that office that aren't from this area.
Okay. Sorry, I have just two more. You mentioned, the individual that had their feet in the stream, sure. And Public Works does an amazing job out at the sewer, making sure that the water leaving Auburn Ravine on the outside is to a very high standard. There was recent coverage in Sacramento about the Sacramento River seeing increased pollution. I would have to imagine that pre the cleaning up of the Auburn Ravine Trail, that too, with garbage and other potential human waste there, is polluting our waterway. Are there no water enforcement or water quality pieces that can be used to help ensure that we don't have, lack of a better word, camps or other people loitering or sticking around in the waterway?
If we see the act taking place, we can take enforcement action. But as far as water, again, I think you're out of my realm as far as what I can do, and testing the water and finding out if somebody did something, you put a bodily function in there. I don't know. And like I said, if we see it happening, then obviously we can take. There are some enforcement actions we can take. But as far as the ongoing problem and what might have been or what could be, that's not going to be the Auburn Police Department.
And I guess I was going with you had mentioned that if they're bathing in a fountain, there's not a lot that we can do. But if they're bathing in a waterway that's heavily protected, is there anything that we can do? Are there any enforcement laws that exist in the Public Resources Code that would allow us to help with the protection? Again, maybe that's not an answer today, but I think that's an important piece of
I think
this
the Public Works
discussion.
Director could probably answer that a lot better than I can.
Bernie, can you install showers at the wastewater treatment plant?
Well, it's getting down to that point where we're going to have to filter our stormwater anyway. There are requirements. The city of Auburn is responsible for general water, stormwater pollution prevention. We have measures to do so. It's very difficult, though. People have their dogs that go into the waterways. So if there is a constant pollutant, of course, we are going to be able to address that. But on the basis of someone being near the ravine, yes, we know the likelihood is there. The enforceability based on contaminants being put in is more limited to a really blatant abuse of that provision. So yes, it is against the water code. How we would enforce it is really challenging.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And my last question for you is, you kind of talked about formulating a plan, and again, it's not just about enforcement, though you're the one up here today, but where's the line of decision making that says we need additional staff, or we need additional overtime, or we need whatever it is, additional resources to address this problem? Because I appreciate, and Chief, you are very good about being fiscally responsible, and you've been very good in your tenure here to ensure that you're maximizing your resources. But I just want to know, where's that line to ensure that we are adding time to code enforcement, that we are spending additional money like we did for brush clearance, But my guess is the cost of an officer and brush clearance and even time for code enforcement is wildly different. One has got to be cheaper than the other. When do you come to us and say it is beyond? Because I look at these statistics, and again, I won't look at the past ones. Like you said, you've done a very good job in the last couple of years, but in 6 months, we're already at 2/3 of what we were last year. So yes, we can hope that it will stay the same, but it looks to me like it is growing. So where is that point that you're going to come to us and say, you know what, we have to devote more money into, again, X, Y, or Z, maybe beyond enforcement?
Obviously, that decision rests with me. I'm the one that's got to make the recommendation to the city manager that I need another body, or I need another 2 bodies to solve this problem. And so again, obviously the ultimate decision relies with me, and when I don't feel that we've done everything, or when I do feel we've done everything and I'm not solving the problem, then that's when I come to you and ask it. I do think the extra patrols have made a difference. I do think that working with Public Works to clear some of these areas will make a difference. So again, I want to, before I come to you, and I'm not so much worried about today, but I don't want to have to hire somebody that we can't afford into the future. So again, I want to maximize everything I have. We utilized overtime to work up the extra patrols to try and address the issue. And again, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to see a more proactive, like the mayor said, when he was out there the day, that overtime body wrote 5 citations. So again, we're doing it with what we have. But when we get to a point where I don't think we can make anything, we can't do any better, and it's not solving the problem, then that's where I come to you and ask you, I need some help here.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the rest for comments.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Mackey?
I'm going to let her go first.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Powers?
Mr. Mayor, and Sid, I'd like to get some clarification, because when we have an informational report, don't we get to ask questions and just make comments at the same time?
We'll do comments after questions. Is that going to be okay?
Well, you guys know how long I've been working on this, and there's a whole lot that I have to say about it, and a couple questions, but mostly just a whole lot that I have to say.
So hit us with your questions, and then
I'll do the best I can to
All
make
right.
it that way. Panhandling, we've already mentioned there's a difference between panhandling, transients, homelessness, long-term homelessness. And I just wanted to help Councilmember Berlant. A while back, we changed an ordinance because we didn't have enough in place to just help those who love the generosity of our county stop coming here in their luxury cars and get dropped off and then panhandle and get, that Councilmember Kirby said, get their 50 grand a year and walk away. We put that ordinance in place, and that's what you use right now, right? To
Well, we look
use
at the aggressive
road violence.
panhandler is when, again, that specific locations where you don't have the ability to leave. But we also use a vehicle code ordinance if they're too close to a freeway. So there are some other tools, or a highway. There are some other tools that we do. That's not the only one, but yes, we can utilize that. We do utilize that, but I would say more than often right now we're using the vehicle code and saying they're too close to a right of way, so that
Right.
we go
Or
after that.
loitering close by,
Yeah.
talking to someone at a gas station, all that's too close to the gas station. All that's still in effect, right?
Yes.
Our panhandling card made a huge difference to the community, to the people that are handing out $100 bills to people. You might recall the one young couple, $100. I watched them, several $100 hand to someone that I was trying to get help to go in somewhere. Do you have plans for us to do that again? Because I have tons of community members that are willing to go to all the shopping centers and educate our community about what services we do have available for our homeless population. Do we have plans to do that again?
It never stopped. We actually re-updated our Facebook last week with the information to get that back on our Facebook page and put it on the front of it. again, but panhandling, we're not really running into the problem that existed when we started that program. There's still a few here and there, but we don't have the magnitude of it or the sophistication of those people who are still in place. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. One of my officers ran into a lady last week who, the person or the transient wasn't even panhandling, but they gave him $20. They weren't even asking for it. They just gave him $20. So again, it's re-educating the community. And whenever we go out to our community meetings, we are talking about that the program still exists. We talk about, don't give that dollar, save those dollars and give it to one of our service providers because they're making a larger impact. So the program is still in place, and we do still talk about it when we're in our community meetings. But again, I think this is the group that we're dealing with now. I think we really have to get to the bottom about why they're here, and I don't think the panhandling's why they're here. I think a lot of these are long-term homeless, like the gentleman we interrupted his place of residence on the hill over there in the Arbor. He'd been here for 15 years. He's still here. And so again, we have to find out the mechanism to help those individuals too, because I believe the panhandling cards help the community, it helped the transient population, and it helped the panhandlers because again, they weren't putting themselves in danger getting too close to cars, and I think it provided our community a mechanism so that they can give the money where it's going to make the biggest difference. But it's still in place, and every once in a while I have people, we just went through and did some more businesses. Somebody came in and asked for some of our flyers that we have, and we just gave some more out, and we've ordered the cards several times since that initial output, and so again, the program's still in place. But I don't think, again, I'm not seeing the people that we're coming in contact with down on the American River Trail that I came.
Right.
Those aren't the same people I'm seeing at the Elm Street Center panhandling. It's a different group of people.
Yeah, so it's still something that,
Absolutely.
on top of all the other issues that we have, should be done in conjunction
Absolutely.
with it.
No,
Don't
it's a multifaceted approach.
compartmentalize it, because if that's out there, because a lot of it's our community too,
Mm-hmm.
that can help. The mayor and I went to a mayor's meeting where they talked about possibly having a regional, all the mayors get together for a bigger regional solution, because we're really this close to being completely out of control
Mhm.
and not being able to handle it. And one more officer is not going to solve that. Has anyone more regionally talked to you about coming up with solutions or to meet? Have
Not
you
on a
heard of
law
anything
enforcement
yet?
basis. That hasn't come up. We talk about some of the issues, and whether it's the Roseville Police Chief or the Rockland Police Chief, Lincoln, we all have some of the same problems. There's no doubt. Have we talked about a regional solution? Absolutely not. Like I said, we're all, I know Roseville has, they dedicated an officer to dealing with their transient homeless population. The county is dedicated for Rockland and Lincoln and your police department. We haven't dedicated, but all of us are doing extra patrols overtime to try and address some of these issues. And so, but have we looked at it from a task force standpoint? No, we haven't.
Okay. Well, I'll save all the rest for comments that I have.
Thank you very much. John, I just have a few questions.
I have questions.
I thought
I
you-
was just letting Bridget go first.
Yeah, because I was all
All right, I'll
riled
come
up
back to you,
and ready to
Councilwoman
have
Mackey.
comments.
Don't skip over me.
I thought you deferred your time
No,
to.
I did
Okay.
not.
No
Defer.
way.
Well, I'm happy to hear your comments or
Thank
questions.
you.
Questions.
Question. I will put it in the form of a question.
Good luck.
And you did a good job. John, is there any written policy or strategy that we have in the city that addresses these issues? I've heard a lot of information tonight from the council members, from you, about Public Works, about what we're doing here, there, everywhere. But is there anything written down anywhere that shows a plan, a strategy, something that we are doing to eliminate or lower the homelessness in our city?
No.
Okay.
We have municipal codes that talk about some of the violations, but as far as a plan going forward, no, there's nothing
Do you
written
think
down.
that would be a good idea?
I do. Anytime you get, I'm a big proponent of plans. I would like to see goals within that plan
Right.
of what we can accomplish. And so I'm in favor of that. I do think it would be beneficial. I don't know if it's going to solve the problem, but at least the public could see a document that, hey, this is what they're doing, because we are doing a lot, and we talked about that today. We do need to do a better job of letting the community know what we are doing, because we are doing some efforts, and my staff and I get on our officers all the time. We call it closing the loops. You know, I'll get a saying, John, I called about this homeless person. The officer didn't do anything. Well, I'll look, and they did do something. They just didn't contact the reporting party back and let them know what they did. So we have to work with our officers and with all the city staff and let the community know that we are doing some things. We're just not, as I said, closing that loop.
Well, I think it also shows us what we're not doing.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important that we're not reinventing the wheel every time we have a meeting like this. I'm a new council member. I don't know everything that the council's done. There's people in the audience that possibly don't know what's been going on. And like you said, community members. So I think if we had a plan, identified our strategies and had goals, then perhaps we would have something that we could document and we could show people.
We had a very productive meeting today with a group of concerned citizen, and we're going to meet again next month. And they brought forward to our last time another ad hoc committee. And again, you look at all the committees that we have, and I don't want to add any more meetings to any individual, but this is a problem that's on the forefront right now. So maybe this is something that we could create an ad hoc committee to create a plan so that we have a path forward and to let the community, not that we're going to solve the problem, but at least let people know that we're working on it.
But a simple plan.
Absolutely.
It's not too
I don't want a book. I want a couple pages. I have
Simple
ADD,
plan.
So
Yeah.
just a couple pages that let the community know that this is what we're doing and this is how we're addressing the issue.
Okay. Also, is the APD involved with any statewide organizations, law enforcement organizations, to lobby our legislators to roll back some of these early release programs and some of these lower penalty programs and things that are directly related to what's happening to our communities in the state of California?
My two lieutenants and I are all part of the California Police Chiefs Association. All of our officers are members of the California Peace Officers Association. So again, we do have lobbying efforts in regard, but again, if you go across the state, not every police chief looks at this as a problem like I do. And so again, every community is going to be different. So, you know, we can't, we're generally on the same page, but there are some differences between us and the Bay Area cities and us and the LA city areas. But again, we do have lobbying efforts in regard to this, and we're all on the same page in regard to some of the social experiments that they're doing down in Sacramento, that we do disagree what they're doing, and we have made it known, but we're just a small entity.
Well, when you, you're a small entity, but, you know, when you join with a large group, you have more.
No, I'm talking law enforcement is a small entity when it comes to lobbying dollars, much smaller than a lot of the other groups.
Yeah. And the parole officer thing, that's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Well, they say they're going to be getting more, but like I said, last month when I was at the meeting, 5 for the 6-county region.
I wanted to ask the mayor, are you in your 2x2s discussing the homeless issue with the supervisor and the county?
We actually did talk about it at our last 2x2, yes.
You did? Okay, good. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just a few questions that haven't been covered. The increased patrols that you've mentioned, how many, how often? Can you just brief us on what that actually means?
We were running extra patrols every week, and then we had a couple officers go down with injuries, so we had to scale some of that back. But then we wanted to keep the progress going, so we supplemented that with patrol staff in their downtime. So again, we're continuing to go forward, but we were running extra patrols through the summer months every week. But you know, like I said, but then like you said, this past weekend we had 6 officers on one night out at patrol, so I have to manage to make sure we're not doing too much overtime with our staff, so we had to scale back some of those. But we're still supplementing code enforcement where they're going out there with our patrol staff. But we were running them every week for probably up until early September.
So in your presentation, you showed some stats, some bar graphs that showed a spike a year or so back, 2 years back. I heard you in a meeting earlier describe what you thought that was caused by. Can you restate
Sure.
why you think there's such a noticeable spike?
I do, and I don't want to say I believe the crimes associated with people without addresses has gone up. I don't think it's been significant as our graphs show, because again, I think the police department's doing a better job of documenting our contacts within our records management system, showing that these people are possibly homeless. So again, we rolled out these efforts, and we're continuing to modify it because we want to capture all the information. We want to provide you with accurate information in regard to this issue. And so again, that spike that we had in 2016, there's no doubt in my mind some of the behavior, criminal behavior went up, but to that magnitude, absolutely not. Like I said, I just think the police department is doing a better job of capturing the data. And I think, like I said, we'll find out in the next, 18 months probably, where we stand there. And so again, are we going to see a consistent basis? Then we're going to know that the problem's staying static. Or if it continues to go up, then I can come in here and, like Councilor Berlant saying, hey, you know what, we've made some great strides, but we're not making a difference because it's continuing to go up.
So again, that spotlight that's been focused on the issue regional is what caused that spike.
Yes, and again, we saw some of these problems coming because we were going to more calls for service. The community was asking us about this more often. And so again, we had to create mechanisms in place so we could capture the data. Like I said, call it spotlight, call it that we saw the problem coming. So yes, I guess to answer your question, yes, we saw it coming, and whether through the spotlight and we started documenting the data much better than we were.
Do you have any sense for how much of your officers' duty time is spent dealing with this population?
I want to say last year, and it's just, I want to say 20% of our calls for service had to do with homeless. I could be wrong, but I want to say that data was about 24%.
24%?
Yeah. So a significant amount of our time.
Yeah. That also will be an interesting metric to watch over time.
Sure.
To see if now that you've implemented the new reporting and data collection, does it trend up?
Stay
plateau?
static or trend down. Obviously we'd love to see it trend down, but I just have a feeling it's going to see trending up. I just don't think it's going to be at the dramatic rise that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Okay. The presentation, you talked about number of citations issued. Is there any correlation? Is there ever a point where you have so many citations that turns into a warrant?
No, one citation will turn into a warrant, but that warrant doesn't necessarily turn into an arrestable offense. So we could write a citation for that citation.
Okay. So again, there's many, well, that's a comment. I'll hold off on that. The panhandling cards, I do think were very successful.
Very successful.
When you worked to roll those out. But there's probably a version of those same panhandling cards that might be effective given the homeless situation that we're dealing with. I mean, in meeting with a local group of residents earlier today, it became apparent that the focus needs to be on getting information to you guys through dispatch so that you guys know what's going on when there's somebody sleeping underneath a bridge or somebody's, drinking on a public trail. Is there any thought of modifying the messaging in those cards to, I'm trying to make this a question. I don't think I'm going to be
We're
successful.
looking at everything's on the table at this
Got
point. Where if those modifying those cards, city managers talked about redoing our panhandling video and getting the services here to talk about that, updating that. Everything's on the table at this point. We want to solve this problem or at least mitigate it as much as possible. So if there is ways and it's time to update those cards for to provide a better service to our community, we're all in. We want to do whatever we can, and so again, we're looking at all facets.
Got it. The Auburn Marine Trail work looks fantastic out there. The cost to do that work was how much?
I think the gross was around 24,000.
And that cost was paid for by whom?
Came out of Public Works.
It came out Public Works and will be distributed with the 2 adjacent property owners.
So the private property owners paid for a portion of it.
Absolutely.
Public Works, there's a sewer line that goes down there, so they probably utilize sewer
A little
funds.
bit of that.
Okay, okay, great. All right, any other questions from the council? We'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Good evening, Mr. Hanley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Kevin Hanley from Auburn. I think you should look at this problem kind of in 2 parts. One is the panhandling problem, in which I think the city has a lot of power and discretion to significantly lower the number of panhandlers. And in 2013, the city manager and public safety director came up with an excellent anti-panhandling program with a video with the Salvation Army and Gathering In and the cards. So the city has a lot of power in this area. Personally, I think there's been too much focus on the cards themselves, because I think it should be a more expansive messaging program to the Auburn residents, who are very generous, to communicate to them that they're making the problem worse. And so, like a simple idea, at the Auburn Town Center, we have lots of panhandlers in that main median, traffic median, mainly for people going out of the town center. So working with the owners of the property to put up a sign right in that median that communicates the message that it is illegal to panhandle in the medians, traffic medians. It's illegal because the homeless people are right in that middle median. And when the driver sees the sign, because we have signs, you can't skateboard, you can't do all kinds of things, we should have one related to panhandling. We want to communicate directly to that driver. If they see that panhandler there, they're not going to give the $20 or $40. And we can have other signs strategically placed throughout the city to just send the message, do not give to the panhandlers, donate to the nonprofits. That's what the original program is about. So putting up simple signs to communicate to the residents, because most people don't know about the cards, they're not going to get the cards, they're not going to give out the cards. So think about how to communicate with all the city residents. So that's the first part, and I agree with Councilwoman Mackey that we should have a written policy on what we're doing about both the panhandling and the anti-camping ordinance. The second part is more difficult because Dr. Marbut, when he put out a study on the homeless population for the county, he suggested that the county, in putting their plan together, involve the cities, involve the various law enforcement agencies from each of the jurisdictions. It was supposed to be a team effort where everyone is working together, because public safety director is right about the problem with people with severe mental illnesses, substance abuse, completely different solution for those people as compared to the panhandlers. And that's a more complex problem. So, and this affects Auburn. You heard all the complaints about the crime at the airport. The property owners out there are very concerned about that. And I can testify, when I was at the chamber, this is not only a homegrown problem. I had people come in the chamber all the time looking for directions to the shelter. So people were coming from outside. It's a whole new dynamic when the shelter went in. And based on surveys, the big complaints were near Bel Air and so forth. And a lot of Auburn residents shop in those areas, so it affects a lot of your residents. So I would suggest that the city council make a concerted effort to push for involvement and push the county to put together a strategic plan. They haven't done it. They're having, law enforcement's doing a great job, the sheriff's office. They have the building officials involved in the shelter, the planning officials, but no one is really responsible for the problem and looking at the outcomes. How can we get people with severe mental illnesses or substance abuse back on their feet? The county has Laura's Law, a 180-day commitment law for the severe mentally ill who pose a harm to themselves or others. That should be a part of the mix too. So I would encourage you to push, especially with a change in the county leadership at the staff level, the CAO, to finally get a good relationship with the county on a strategic plan that involves the city. And yes, you may have to contribute in some way, but the citizens are paying the price right now. They're the victims of the crimes and so forth. So, difficult problem, but look at it in the two parts. One, get that policy on the panhandling and anti-camping, and then engage in the county. And I'm not a big fan of the 2x2 private meetings at all. I think there should be public meetings to put pressure on the county to work with other cities, not just Auburn, Colfax and Roseville and Rockland. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this item? Good evening.
My name's Robert Kisleff, K-I-S-E-L-E-F-F. I'm also a resident of South Auburn. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I appreciated the presentation tonight as well. In regards to the West America Trail, the Auburn Ravine Trail, I think I've seen some really nice progress there. The cleanup has been good. I understand it. It certainly conveniences one person there. But I think from the standpoint of the fire hazard that was there, probably the cleanup, probably the line of sight for the officers to be able to go out there on their regular patrols and not have to get out in a dangerous situation. I think that was an excellent first step in between law enforcement and public works and in the city doing that. So I do want to commend you for that. I kind of want to talk a little bit about next steps, particularly as it pertains to the community and how we can participate and contribute to the situation. Last meeting kind of brought up the point of an ad hoc committee, and Director Ruffcorn kind of highlighted that as well. I think whatever format, and it sounds like I was in attendance at the meeting this afternoon. I thought it was a great first step for us, and we'll have another one next month. But I think in terms of where this takes us, I just had a few thoughts I want to share on that. I think whatever format that is, if it is an ad hoc committee, if it's a roundtable, perhaps, or even if it's like a permanent committee, sort of like a traffic committee here, I think there's a few things that we need to get out of that. One is we need to make sure that we have clear objectives. We talked about a lot of different types of issues surrounding this. Mr. Hanley talked about the education of our community here. You've got panhandling, chronic homelessness, crime. That's here. I think it's important to have a focus on what we're going to do first. In the situation, have clear objectives for that, and also accountability for everyone that's involved, the community and the city and different departments. If it's public safety, public works involved in this as well, but everyone has to be accountable for their part of that, and then we need to be able to measure what we're doing in terms of our performance, and are we really meeting the goals that we're setting out to meet in terms of those objectives. So I'm not sure exactly what the right format is for that, but I think it's important to make sure that we that we're able to meet those types of objectives. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have anybody else who'd like to speak to the council on this item? All right. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to council for comments. I can't remember where I started last. I'll start on this side.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to rehash a lot of what we've said and what I've said over and over and over, but that seems to be a lot of what we're doing, is talking about it. One thing I do want to say, Chief, and our Public Works Director's not here, but I think we've made significant strides in the public perception of what we've been able to do here in the last couple of weeks. And I want to continue that momentum, because whether it is we've always been doing this work and the problem is still there, or whether it's real that we've put in more time and emphasis, it doesn't really matter, because the perception is we're doing nothing. And again, the county, as I mentioned, is doing a significantly good job at letting their residents know, look what our officers are doing. They've made Sacramento regional media showing their officers cleaning homeless camps, and where I'm not sure that's the best use of our officers' time or our funding. I think that we've made some good moves, and I really appreciate hearing about what you and even our other officers have done to work with Public Works to address issues like lights being out. These are small things that I don't think we all think about, that I appreciate seeing that inter-city coordination occurring. The Auburn Ravine Trail, again, as I mentioned many times, I drive by it every single day. It looks amazing, the work that's been done. But that area is less than an acre of our over 7 square mile city. So it's such a small little piece. And the sad part, and I don't know if sad is the right word, but just driving home and then coming to this council meeting, there were 3 people hanging out in the same spot, whether they were just residents on a walk, which I'm pretty sure they're not, or for whatever other activities they were doing. The problem still may be there, sure. Though again, the clearance of the vegetation is definitely a very good first step. The thing that I really want to continue to stress, and I want to see action on, is our participation in the County Homeless Task Force. Whether it's just having an officer that's a liaison officer, we need to really ensure that we're having a consistent approach with the county. And even if that's just talking strategy and just going, they talked when they came to our council about the trainings that they were attending. Well, maybe we can send some officers to some of those trainings. So again, we have the same base foundation that the county has. I agree with a department our size compared to the county sheriff. Putting one officer dedicated to just this may not be the best use of our funds, but I think we need to do a better job of participating in that task force. And again, I say that knowing that at your level, and it sounds like on a day-to-day basis, I know the deputies and the officers are talking and coordinating, but I'm specifically looking for what is that task force doing and what are we bringing back to the city so that we're consistent. I agree with what was mentioned here earlier of it's great the 2x2 meetings of what the county is doing and us being able to have those communication, but I want to see us doing more with the county, because they definitely are working to address the problem, and I want to see that consistency. You talked about the AB 109 money going towards one of the officers at one of our, I believe we're part of 2 task forces. I don't want to question, but I think we need to have some discussion and really look at is using our AB 109 money for that task force the best bang for the buck? And maybe it is.
We don't have a choice. We have to participate to get the money.
But specifically to that specific task force, not necessarily using it for...
No, because they're helping out probation with their... We don't have a choice in that. We have to have that body there participate in that particular task force in reference to the higher offender AB 109 people that probation deals with. We don't have a choice.
Well, I appreciate you making that clarification, and maybe that's where we as a council, I think, have a role in this, especially with the League of California Cities meeting. It was mentioned your involvement in the Police Chiefs Association, our officers' role. I think we all have roles here to do a continued job of really requiring the state to give us more funding for this problem that they've created. I know it's going to be said here, again, there's a lot of, I think, root cause from AB 109, from Prop 47, from Prop 57. We're letting more people that were once behind bars out into the community. And there may be plenty of good reasons that I can't think of right now of why that's been a good idea. but they need to give us more money to help us to address the problem that it's created. And maybe our legislature and our governor didn't realize the impacts that it would have, though I know the Police Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association lobbied against these, but we need to do a good job, and I look towards to us, especially with the League of California Cities meeting, our representation on some of the regional boards to continue to say, listen, we need some additional funding because we have a tight budget, and I mentioned earlier, and I don't want to understress this, you do a very good job of making sure that your department is maximizing every dollar, but maybe we need more money to deal with this problem that somebody else has created. So I want to see us all continuing that piece. There was some discussion about the citizens' role on this issue, and I think that's a very important piece. It's been mentioned, well, report it to the police department. Well, at some point we need to understand, well, what's reportable? Is the three, you almost used the word transient, but the 3 individuals that were hanging out in the Auburn Ravine Trail for more than an hour, is that a crime? It sounds like no. So am I going to then slow down our 911 system or our one dispatcher by calling to say, hey, this could be a problem? Where's that line? When do we want people to call? And I think the discussion about the panhandling campaign maybe shifting into more of a citizens awareness campaign of whatever you want to call this problem is where we need to go. So I want to see us really address not just bringing back the panhandling campaign, but bringing a campaign back that educates our citizens on their role. What should they be doing in this problem? The mention about the panhandling signage. The Rock Creek Plaza shopping center where Kmart is, they have signage that says, do not give money to people. It probably is a little bit more better worded than that. But I think that a simple sign, working with the property owners, because I would have to imagine that the owners of that shopping center and the individual businesses in that shopping center would obviously appreciate not having loiterers, transients, panhandlers, homeless, whatever you want to call them, in their shopping center. A simple sign I think is a small cost that would go a long way. So I appreciate the idea and the thought that was brought up by Mr. Hanley. I think we definitely need to do that. I want to talk about, though, and I think it needs to be us as a council, not just with our public safety director, but when are we going to start actually looking at when do we dedicate more money? It sounds like we put in possibly $20,000 to clean up the Auburn Ravine Trail. As I mentioned, that's one piece. That's not sustainable for us to continue to clear out every piece. I would like to see that happen, especially along the canyon, for brush clearance, for fire danger. But we can't afford to do that. So that may not be the wisest use of our money, and not questioning the work that was done. But I think we really need to look at code enforcement, police officer, overtime officer positions, brush clearance, housing, Health and Human Services, and these are services that the county's providing, but this all needs to be part of the discussion. And again, I feel bad because I'm looking at you, but it's not just enforcement. It has to be all of these components. And again, 2 of those, housing and the Health and Human Services, is a county responsibility. So where are they in this discussion? They're dealing with it too, so we need to be part of that discussion. And the last thing that I want to stress on that I want to ask us as a council to make happen is, it was mentioned at the last meeting that we would have a community workshop. I think that's critical. I think we have to have an opportunity beyond this. There are 4 individuals here that have been coming for the last couple of meetings. This is not representative of the Auburn community that sees this as a problem and wants to do something. They can't all make a city council meeting, but I think we need to really start working on some other additional avenues to educate them on what we're doing so that they know that perception is reality, that we are doing more, but also understand their role. So I would ask that we do hold a community workshop sooner than later and start working a campaign to get that information out. And if it costs money, then I think we need to discuss that, because I'm not hearing people come to our city council meetings saying, I want more potholes fixed. That's a problem. We heard loud and clear, but nobody's come here and said in the past year that's the problem. But what the reoccurring issue is the homelessness, transient, panhandling, whatever you want to call it, problem. So if we need to divert some money like we're doing, then I think we need to really address that. And I'll end it with one piece that's very sad. My wife's family owns a number of franchises here in Placer and Nevada County. They're thinking of closing the store in the Auburn area specifically because of the transients in their shopping center, because it has driven down sales so much that people don't want to shop at or go to their business anymore. That's a sad state of affairs when businesses are closing. And when we are spending money to beef up our economics and bring in an economic development to say, come to our community, whether it's living or recreating, but people see transients and homeless people and all, we're sending a mixed message. I want to see us do more. But again, I cannot understate the appreciation that I have to hear that we are doing something. We need to do more, and we need to get that word out there to our citizens. So, Chief, I appreciate you taking my banter here, but again, it's meant for the entire city management. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Powers.
Do you mind?
Go right ahead.
First of all, Mr. Hanley mentioned it earlier. I'm going to talk about two separate issues. I want to thank the police department and the public works for all the work you've done so far. It's quite a bit of work. I want to thank you for the caring and compassion that you've given to the people who you've displaced, who some haven't really committed any crime other than intoxication, perhaps mental illness, or drug addiction, which is a disease. And it's very difficult. So first of all, just thank you for that part. There's a book. It's called Until They Have Faces, written by a guy named Bob Litchfield. And he interviewed 110 homeless people in the Auburn area several years ago. I think I cried through the entire book because every single person had a face, and a lot of them I recognized who they were. I knew them around town because I took the time to go and talk to them. 80% of them had mental illness, drug or alcohol addiction, while the others perhaps maybe were on parole. This is before AB 109, which changed our whole dynamics. But that was where the biggest problem and part of the issue happened. So I just want to read something really quick, and then I have more, and I'll try and go quickly because everyone's pretty much said quite a bit. Counties are the primary providers for state and federal health programs. Counties receive special funding from the state and federal government to run these programs. The city of Auburn receives nothing, yet we still help in a lot of ways, especially what our director of public safety has already done so far. The tax structure reflects this arrangement. For example, of the property taxes you pay, the city receives about 7%. The county receives more than 18%, with the lion's share going to schools at 61%. Health and Human Services are the largest expenditure area for the county at over $200 million. Traditionally, the county's largest revenue sources have come from the state and federal government. Much of that is for health and welfare programs. If we want to get to the bottom of this close to being uncontrollable and unmanageable, we have to address those issues first. And that's a regional issue. And as I stated earlier, the mayor and I went to a mayor's lunch, and during that mayor's lunch, Mayor Darrell Steinberg, who has a far bigger issue with homelessness than we do here in the city of Auburn, has a lot of ideas on how to make that happen. And at that meeting, the mayor will recall that I requested that we had a meeting of the mayors to sort of talk about the bigger picture, because we can fix a lot of things right here. And I strongly believe that our community is ready to help. You're here in the audience. But I can't fix someone's mental illness. I can't fix someone who's almost going to be homeless, because I don't know that they're almost going to be homeless because they have a mental illness, or they have an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction, and they've worn out all their welcome everywhere else. That is where we have to get to first. And that's where Health and Human Services come in, helping ahead of time and helping after. But that is why, if you read that book, you will see how many people are on the streets for that reason. So I get a little bit compassionate about it because I was a part of those brochures. I was a part of changing the ordinance, that I strongly believe that as a community, Placer County is very generous, and we give because we think that's okay, and we don't educate. And so I believe that we have to do twofold. We have to educate our citizens, have our citizens help us as a city because they're begging us to, and stop the panhandling side of thing. Even though it subsides, it ebbs and flows, we want the community to know you don't get money here, you get services, and we're going to show you how to get those services. Then the next thing to do is what our our director of public services, I always want to call him chief. He's been the chief for forever to me. So what he's done so far is he's helped a lot of these camps and people that are in dangerous areas. We're a high fire danger community. So he did what he had to do, which is the right thing to do, is to protect our community and clear out those homeless camps and shelters. And at the same time, with compassion, help those people get to the services that are available for them. But like I said, I believe it's a lot of education. Like I said, our issue, we do have to do a lot of things that Councilmember Berlant has mentioned about trying to keep our community safe. The issue is deeper, and we need to do it regionally. And also, we need to remember that there is a Health and Human Services Department, and we don't even have any mental health facilities in the state of California anymore for people to go and get that help. And I understand the reasons why they were eliminated before, but maybe there's some halfway point or somewhere in between that can help those people so that they can stay in homes, not be kicked out and become homeless. So it's a bigger issue, and it's about to explode. And so until we work as a region or as an entire state of California, it's not going to get any better. But I commend our department for all the work they've done and for the cooperation they've done with the county as well, especially out at the airport. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Mackey.
Brief. Thank you for the presentation, John, and Public Works, who's not here, for all the help they've given in this problem. It's a societal problem. That's what Danielle and Bridget's saying. And it's hard for us to solve all of society's problems. But for our own community, I believe that there's a lot we can do. I agree we should have a community workshop, but I would prefer it be agendized and not just a workshop where people can come and complain, but where people can come with ideas. And we have a few wonderful community members here that are here every week and have every council meeting and have given us good ideas. Unfortunately, a lot of community members just like to get on Facebook and complain, and they're very apathetic about calling the police or calling with their complaints or helping us come to a solution with their problems, but they definitely want to complain. So I think a workshop would be a good place for them to voice their complaints, but we need to be able to show them our plans and our strategy for helping the homeless in our community, no matter what type of help we give them. So I want to make sure that that's inclusive and that before we have that, we make sure that we have it all in place as far as what we can do and what they might and might not know. I mean, I'm learning all the time, as I'm sure people in the audience are, and so it would be a good educational tool. I agree with that. So thank you again, John.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to be brief here as well, because I do agree that a lot of good comments have been made by my colleagues. The presentation, John, included the metrics, and those, I think, are a critical step and understanding the problem and planning for how we're going to deal with the problem. 10 years, more than 10 years ago, in 2004, the county adopted their 10-year plan to end homelessness. And obviously, we know that that plan wasn't successful. So the idea for the city to come up with a plan to do something similar, I'm not opposed to, but let's be realistic with what we're trying to do here. We're trying to manage a problem. We've had homeless people in Auburn from the very beginning. My wife tells me stories as she was a kid. Homeless people were around back then, just a couple years ago. And it's a problem that we as a community, based on all of the outside influences that are coming largely from the state capitol, we have to learn how to manage it. And a workshop is, in my opinion, exactly what we need to do. We need to start the sharing of ideas. I spent time with one of the police officers who's from Sacramento, and he's on our force. He went on the tour with Jennifer, our code enforcement officer, and myself. And his experiences in Sacramento, he had some great ideas of different ways to help manage our problem that we've got. And that's the dialogue that I want to have in this forum, workshop, scheduled agendized meeting, whatever it might turn into. But we need to start sharing the ideas because, again, I heard some great ideas from a few of John's officers while I was out in the field with them. I've heard some great ideas from our city manager on ordinance updates and changes that might be able to be implemented to help give John more tools and to help solve, the problem from a different vantage point. All of those things are things that the city has control over and we can do. The partner that we have to engage in this effort is the county. And as described, Health and Human Services is their responsibility. All of our sales tax goes to the county. They keep a very large percentage of sales tax dollars from our city to provide our community health and human services. So that's what we need to partner with them. We need to engage with them. I'll make a brief comment on the 2x2s. We started doing 2x2s to try to fix a relationship that I think was broken for a while, and I think they're providing fruit in that vein. So we're not making decisions and setting policy in those meetings. We're sharing conversation, and in this case, I think it's been very beneficial to improve our relationship with Placer County, and I personally think they're a good thing. We did at our last meeting have a casual conversation about what are they doing. And again, we're not out in the field like John is and talking with their homeless patrol that they've got. But it's good for us, I think, to have casual conversation in that 2x2 setting. I appreciate it, and I think it's doing a good job to mend fences. The workshop, we had our first meeting with the community group, and you folks have been attending quite a few of our meetings, and it was stated in the meeting earlier that pressure has been applied. I don't disagree with that sentiment. I mean, you're clearly making us talk about this, which I think is a very good thing. It is a problem. John's matrix that he's collecting are going to give us a better understanding if it's a problem that's got a increase or incline as far as getting worse, or it's a problem that's plateaued based on the way we're collecting data now. But that meeting was kind of the first step. We wanted to interact with you guys, get an understanding of what your thoughts were, and sit down. Next workshop, next meeting, I'd like to sit down and have a very constructive conversation about how can we all partner to help manage this situation. Is it community patrols? Is it different resolutions, different laws that we can pass in the city that help the law enforcement side of thing? Is there management of retailers to help curb the sale of easy to consume alcoholic beverages? And then, of course, at some point, the county has to be brought into it, because a huge part of this issue is the health and human services, the mental health issue. We interacted with, I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, I think. We've interacted with 5 or 6 different people when we were out touring the various encampments, and all of them were very politely offered rides and lifts to the shelter, and none of them wanted to go. So these folks don't want anything to do with the shelter. They want to be where they're at, they want to be left alone, but there's where the rub comes into play, because our citizens have a right to be able to walk on paths and not feel threatened and not have to witness horrific things out there on our public trails. So we're taking steps, we're doing this methodically, we're not going to just leap into something. We're working behind the scenes on quite a few different things, but this next step with the workshop, I do think is the appropriate thing to do to continue the dialogue. And again, I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to figure out a way to end the homeless problem here in Auburn, but we've got some really smart community members and some folks on this council. We ought to be able to come up with a way to manage this situation better than it's been done in the recent past. So with that was just an informational item.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask though, for our next steps and moving forward, we've talked about a plan, we've talked about a community workshop. Is our first step to put together a task force that in a public meeting where we can invite community members to start addressing how are we going to put together this plan? Because I definitely agree, as Councilwoman Mackey said, that we really need to have a plan in place before we educate our residents on what their role is. But besides trying to rehash every week telling us where the problem hotspots are, should we set up a more structured task force to start these discussions?
I'm not opposed to doing something like that. I think we've got some conversation to occur before we decide as a council that a formal homeless committee is the appropriate way to go. It may be. I'm not saying it's not. It's just I'd like to hold the workshop, have the dialogue, share the ideas, and then plan from there. And that conversation may lead to some sort of a formal plan. Again, I'm not opposed to that. If we spend the time and energy to put together a plan, we've got to implement it, and we have to have realistic and measurable metrics that we can judge performance of the plan. And I think personally that first step is that workshop, Councilmember
Well,
Lamb.
as long as the workshop has an agenda that states what we are doing, what we have done, what we're going to do going forward, and then suggestions as to how we can make all that better. So it's a very structured workshop.
I agreed. And as reported to us tonight from Director Ruffcorn, the activities that have been going on, I think, are going to produce good results. And we've started with a trail. That's just one cleanup area that's gone on in the city. There's many, many others. The 2 encampments that John reported that are on ARD property, I was told by Jennifer Solomon, our code enforcement officer, that she's been working with ARD and their plan to clean those up. They're massive encampments. It's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars for ARD to clean those things up, and they have to get across the railroad tracks to do it. So I was told that they're in the process of cleaning them up. Those were the last 2 active encampments. But again, it's the balloon analogy. As soon as you push it in one spot, it's going to pop out somewhere else. And that's where maybe that coordination with the county sheriff's department might be appropriate. So go ahead.
Circle back, is it appropriate though that you or city staff come back at the next meeting to let us know when a date would be that we can, it doesn't have to be a formal task force, but at least something to kind of get this ball rolling, because I appreciate them coming every day. I appreciate, me rehashing my driving down Auburn Ravine stories, but can we get a date set to at least kind of get this ball rolling and determine what that outcome or objectives are going to be?
Yes, so what I would propose is at our next meeting, we will announce the date of the workshop. Our city manager is going to take a brief vacation, but we'll get that all planned and scheduled for our next meeting.
2 weeks.
I was talking to Councilman Berland.
Oh, I'm
It's a
sorry.
Who just returned from his 2-week vacation, so I will not
In comparison.
question the city manager's time because I think it's well needed. I appreciate that, and I'll look forward to when he returns a date. So thank you.
No problem. All right. With that, as we kind of started the meeting, just in remembrance of the fallen on 9/11 in 2001, I would like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
No committee reports?
Committee reports.
Ah, dang it.
Sorry. The one time I have them. Sorry, Matt.
So I'll reopen the meeting and invite my colleagues
Take
to
that.
give us committee reports.
I'll be
I'm
quick.
sure they're going to be good.
Mine's going to be really quick.
Mine are, oh, do you want to go first?
No, you go first, after all.
Just aggressive today, I don't know. The Pioneer Community Energy Power Board met this afternoon, and there's a couple pieces of legislation going through the legislative bodies that might put some hiccups in the process, and so we've approved a 3-year contract with a company that helps get them set up with computer systems. We've approved a fiscal proposed budget, but everything's sort of on hold until we know in the next couple of weeks of what that legislation is going to do in order for us to be able to offer options for our community in where they get their power from. I'll keep you posted. The Business Park Association Airport meets next September 21st from 5:30 to 7 if anyone's interested in attending. Lots of exciting, interesting information, and some of it's cyber theft. It'll be one topic. The Streetscape History and the Shack meets on the 28th at 4 p.m. If anyone's interested, we have one tile submission to look at, but we are going to final and approve a few to bring forth to the council to do a couple more tiles. And then I think you'll find this interesting, the I-80 State Route 65 Interchange Phase 1 project update is going through, and it's expected to be fully opened by 2020, and that would be adding a 3rd lane from I-80 to Pleasant Grove Boulevard. But you don't care about that as much as you care about Highway 49 sidewalks. Caltrans is going to take the lead on the project, but from Highway 49 from I-80 to Dry Creek Road, and also here I-80 all the way 49, working on sidewalks in some locations. I don't have all the exact locations. Some are in the city limits. I'll keep you posted. But you can see some work's already been done out there on Highway 49, and I know that in the city limits is coming up soon. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mackey.
I'm taking a vacation and I will not be here for the next council meeting. I'm only going to be gone a week. Because I don't want to miss any of my committee meetings or possible workshops. That's it.
Thank you, Councilman Berlin. My meetings are all upcoming this week and next, so with that, what I said before, I'll adjourn the meeting. Good night, everybody.
I forgot Daniel. Oh, we did. I shook my head no. Oh.